Every morning, most people lose a battle before the day has even begun. Not because tragedy arrived, not because life attacked them, not because they failed, but because the first thing that claimed their mind was not their own judgment. It was the phone, the notifications, the unfinished stress from yesterday, the pressure of work, the opinions of strangers, the quiet fear that today will become another copy of the life they keep promising themselves they will change. And before their feet even touch the floor, their peace is already gone. That is how most people live, not ruined by one catastrophe, but slowly weakened by 1,000 unconscious mornings. The Stoics understood something modern life keeps teaching people to forget. You do not become mentally strong in the moment pressure arrives. You discover whether you trained before it did. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire under war, betrayal, disease, and death. Epictetus was born a slave. Seneca lived among wealth, exile, politics, and constant uncertainty. These men were not writing philosophy from peaceful lives. They were writing from pressure, and they returned again and again to the same truth. Your life is shaped less by what happens to you, and more by the state of mind in which you meet it. That is why the morning matters, because if you lose the first hour, you often lose the tone of the whole day. If you begin in reaction, you usually remain in reaction. If you wake up scattered, rushed, overstimulated, and inwardly defeated, you do not carry that only into breakfast. You carry it into your decisions, your speech, your patience, your focus, your standards, your character. So this is not about productivity hacks. It is not about becoming one of those people who wakes up at 4:30 in the morning just to perform discipline for the internet. This is deeper than that. This is about becoming mentally unshakable. Not hard, not numb, not robotic, unshakable. The kind of person who can meet chaos without becoming chaos. The kind of person who does not need a perfect day to remain internally governed. The kind of person who wakes up and remembers, my mind belongs to me before it belongs to the world. Today we are going through 12 Stoic morning habits that help build that kind of mind. Not for ideal mornings, for real ones. For mornings when your thoughts are noisy, when your energy is low, when old patterns come back asking for another chance to run your life. Let us begin. The morning is not about productivity. There is something modern culture gets wrong about mornings. It treats them like a performance. Wake up earlier, do more, optimize everything, track every metric. Cold shower, supplements, journal, stretch, meditate, read, run, post about it. And somehow, after all that, people feel more fragmented than ever. Why? Because they have confused activity with authority. The Stoics would say the morning is not primarily for doing more. It is for governing yourself. That is a very different goal. Doing more may improve output, but governing yourself improves character, and character survives bad days. Character survives low energy. Character survives disappointment. Character survives uncertainty. Character survives mornings when life does not cooperate with your plans. That is why two people can wake up with the same schedule and still live completely different lives. One begins the day by reacting. The other begins the day by choosing. One spends the morning consuming impressions. The other spends the morning creating orientation. One gives the world first access to the mind. The other remembers the mind must be claimed before it can be spent. That is what this reset is really about. Not becoming impressive, becoming internally directed. Habit 1. Win the first battle before leaving the bed. Most people think the first battle of the day happens at work, or in traffic, or during some difficult conversation. It does not. It happens in the dark, in silence, between the alarm and your feet touching the floor. Nobody sees it, nobody applauds it, but it matters more than people realize. Because in that small moment you meet the first negotiator of the day. The voice that says, stay down, 5 more minutes, start tomorrow, you need to feel better first. Just scroll for a minute, you will do it later. But that voice is almost never just talking about sleep. It is rehearsing a pattern of delay, a pattern of softness, a pattern of letting comfort make the first decision of the day. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself that when you struggle to rise, remember that you are rising to do the work of a human being. That is not a line about hustle. It is a line about dignity. He was reminding himself that a human life is not meant to be governed by comfort alone. You are here to act, to contribute, to meet reality consciously. That changes everything, because once you stop waiting to feel like the person you want to become, you can begin becoming that person through action. So the first habit is not merely waking up early. It is this: win the first battle before excuses gather momentum. Stand up quickly, open the curtain, let light hit your face, put your feet on the floor before comfort builds a legal case against your standards. Because comfort is persuasive. It always sounds reasonable. It always sounds compassionate. It always promises relief. But if you listen closely, it almost always argues for the smaller life. The Stoic does not let the smaller life make the first decision. He rises, even tired, especially tired. Because each morning you stand up when it would be easier not to, you cast the first vote for the person you are becoming. And self-trust is built exactly like that, not through motivation, through evidence. Habit 2, delay the world's voice. Getting out of bed is not enough. Many people wake early only to surrender their minds immediately, not back to sleep, to something more dangerous, a screen. Imagine inviting 100 strangers into your room the moment you wake up. Some bring anxiety, some bring outrage, some bring envy, some bring urgency. Some remind you how far behind you feel. Some try to tell you what matters before you have had one clear thought of your own. That is what many people do every morning with their phone. Before they speak to themselves, they have already listened to everyone else. The Stoics were deeply careful about impressions, those first things that strike the mind and try to seize it before reason has examined them. And the modern phone is a machine of unmanaged impressions. A headline tells you to worry, a message tells you to react, a post tells you to compare, a video tells you who you should become, an email tells you you are already late to your own life. And by 7 in the morning, your nervous system is serving masters you never consciously chose. So here is the second habit: delay the world's voice. Before the feed, return to yourself. Before the inbox, return to yourself. Before the algorithm, return to yourself. Sit up and breathe. Drink water in silence. Stand by the window. Watch the sky for a minute. Wash your face slowly. Let your consciousness arrive before your obligations do. You do not need an hour, but you do need a border. Because once the world gets first access to your mind every morning, eventually it begins to believe it owns it. And maybe the reason so many people feel mentally weak by noon is not because life is too hard, but because they handed away inner authority before the day even started. Habit 3, enter silence before you enter speech. There is a reason weak minds fear silence, because silence does not flatter you. It does not distract you, it does not entertain you, it does not sedate you, it reveals. The anxiety you keep covering, the resentment you have not named, the grief you keep outrunning, the dependence on stimulation, the truth you keep postponing. That is why so many people wake up and immediately start talking, scrolling, listening, consuming, or filling the room with noise. Not because silence is empty, because silence is honest. And Stoicism begins there, not in performance, in encounter. Marcus Aurelius did not use the morning to entertain himself. He used it to recollect himself, to remember what kind of person he wanted to be before entering the arena of other minds. That is what silence is for, not emptiness, alignment. So let the morning be quiet, at least for a little while. No podcast immediately. No music right away. No unnecessary chatter. No digital noise. Let the mud settle. Most people are terrified that if they sit still with themselves, they will overthink. But what they call overthinking is often just unprocessed life waiting for one clean moment of stillness. And if you never give it that moment, it follows you everywhere. Into your work, into your relationships, into your decisions, into your sense of self. Silence, then, is not indulgence. It is maintenance. It is where the psyche straightens its back before carrying the day. When you learn to tolerate that quiet and eventually respect it, something changes. You stop fearing your own company. You stop needing distraction as anesthesia. You begin hearing the difference between a real concern and a dramatic thought. And that makes you harder to shake, because now the world must meet a person who has already met himself. Habit 4, create order immediately. This sounds small. Good. Small things reveal the hidden structure of a person. If your first physical act of the day is drift, mess, delay, and neglect, your nervous system absorbs that. If your first physical act is order, completion, and quiet self-respect, it absorbs that too. That is why this habit matters. Create order immediately, make the bed, open the room, clear the surface, put something in its place. No, making your bed will not solve your life, but the psychology behind it matters, because it says, I do not walk past disorder and call it normal. I do not neglect my first environment and then expect my mind to feel governed. I do not begin the day surrounded by evidence of looseness and then wonder why I feel internally scattered. Stoicism is not about grand speeches. It is about bringing virtue into the concrete, into the room, the body, the schedule, the tone of voice, the response you choose when nobody is watching. So do not make your bed like a chore. Make it like the first proof of self-command. Order outside does not guarantee order inside, but it helps. And over time, those small acts become signals to the mind. Signals that say, we are not beginning the day in collapse, we are beginning it upright. Mentally unshakable people do not wait for giant moments of discipline. They train discipline into tiny acts, repeated so often that order becomes familiar. Because the soul is always practicing something, even in the first 5 minutes. Habit 5, move before mood. There is a kind of morning heaviness that thought cannot solve. It is not philosophical, it is physical. And if you try to reason your way out of it while staying collapsed, the mind often becomes more convincing than it is wise. This is why the 5th habit is simple: move before mood. Walk, stretch, step outside, do push-ups, breathe deeply, get sunlight on your face. Wake the body before the mind begins constructing a noble argument for staying passive. Some mornings you do not need a better belief. You need circulation. Because a stagnant body often becomes an anxious mind. When the body is inert, resistance sounds intelligent. Mood grows heavier, thoughts become darker. Passivity starts feeling like truth. The Stoics were not obsessed with aesthetics. They were obsessed with mastery. And mastery includes the body, because the body influences the ruling faculty more than proud minds like to admit. So do not wait until later to move if you can avoid it. Move early. Not because you are trying to become heroic before breakfast, because you are trying to interrupt collapse before it becomes identity. 5 minutes is enough, 10 is better. A walk around the block can change the chemistry of a morning. The point is not athletic performance. The point is to send your system a message. We are not staying folded. We are entering the day upright, and the brain hears that message very clearly. Habit 6, rehearse the day's difficulties. Here is one reason so many people lose their peace. They expect a smooth day, then reality arrives. Traffic happens, delays happen, rude people happen, misunderstandings happen, fatigue happens, technology fails, plans change, your own mood wobbles. And because people expected ease, every normal obstacle feels like a personal insult. The Stoics trained differently. Before the day began, they rehearsed reality, not to become pessimists, to stop being emotionally ambushed by predictable life. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that he would meet difficult people, the meddling, the arrogant, the deceitful, the jealous, the selfish, not because he hated people, because he wanted to be ready. That is the 6th habit, rehearse the day's difficulties. Ask yourself each morning, where might I be tested today? What is likely to frustrate me? Where will impatience try to take over? Where might ego wake up? How do I want to respond when it does? That small rehearsal creates space between event and reaction. It changes the emotional economy of the day. Because once difficulty is expected, it stops feeling like betrayal. It becomes part of the path. That means less outrage, less self-pity, less wasted energy. You are not asking the day to obey your preferences. You are preparing your character for the day that is actually coming. That is what makes a person unshakable, not fantasy, readiness. Habit 7. Choose your character in advance. Most people do not choose who they will be in the morning. They inherit a personality from circumstance. If the weather is good, they are pleasant. If the email is rude, they are angry. If someone praises them, they are energized. If someone ignores them, they shrink. If the commute is easy, they are patient. If it is hard, they become someone else. That is not freedom. That is weather-based identity. The Stoic asks a harder question before the day begins. Who will I be when pressure arrives? Who am I when I am tired? Who am I when I am not admired? Who am I when people are careless? Who am I when things take longer than I want? Who am I when my mood does not cooperate? Choose in advance, patient, exact, disciplined, calm, difficult to provoke, honest without drama, strong without aggression, kind without weakness, steady without needing applause. This habit changes everything, because when you decide your values beforehand, you stop renegotiating them every time emotion flares. Epictetus taught that your faculty of choice is what is truly yours, so use the morning to exercise it. Not how do I hope to feel today, but what standard will I carry today, regardless of how I feel? That question moves identity from mood into principle, and principle is much harder to shake than emotion. Habit 8. Journal for clarity. Journaling is often presented as a soft ritual, aesthetic, relaxing, decorative. That is not what the Stoics were doing. Marcus Aurelius did not write to impress anyone. He wrote to correct himself, to confront distortion, to recover perspective, to remember what mattered, to strip emotion from illusion, to speak hard truth where nobody else could hear it. That is how you should use journaling in the morning, not as decoration, as calibration. Write 1 page, half a page, a few sharp lines. What am I carrying into today? What is trying to disturb me? What story am I telling that makes me weaker? What is actually in my control? What matters today in ordinary terms? What would strength look like before noon? Write until the fog begins to thin. Because thoughts left floating often gain power through vagueness. Thoughts put on paper become visible, and once visible, they can be challenged. This is one of the fastest ways to separate fear from fact, and mentally unshakable people are very good at that separation. They do not believe every thought just because it arrived in the morning wearing urgency. They examine it, name it, reduce it, correct it if necessary. That is what journaling can do when used properly, not just emotional release, mental sanitation. Habit 9. Practice gratitude before ambition. Many people wake up already behind. Before the day has even started, their attention is fixed on what is missing. More money, more progress, more certainty, more validation, more results, more control. So they begin the morning in hunger. And hunger, when it governs the soul, makes a person easy to manipulate. Because someone who feels empty will try to fill himself with anything, achievement, attention, comparison, praise, momentum, noise. The Stoics offered a different starting point, gratitude before ambition, not as sentimentality, as sanity. You woke up, you have breath, you have some measure of time, you have at least one more chance to act with dignity. You have another chance to repair your life where it has gone crooked. That is not small. Seneca understood that much suffering begins in blindness, in taking for granted what could be taken away. The morning is the perfect time to reverse that blindness. Before you chase anything, notice what is already here. The bed you woke in, the water you drink, the light coming through the window, a person you love, a body that still carries you, a mind still capable of reflection, another day in which correction is possible. Gratitude does not weaken ambition, it cleans it. Now you are not chasing from emptiness, you are building from sufficiency. A grateful person can work intensely without becoming spiritually starved. A grateful person can want more without despising the present. A grateful person is harder to break because they are not trying to become whole through achievement alone. That is strength. Habit 10. Feed the mind something higher. if the first words entering your mind every day are random, shallow, reactive, and algorithmically engineered, do not be surprised when your thinking becomes fragmented. Input matters. The Stoics understood this long before smartphones, neuroscience, and media theory. They knew the soul takes the shape of what it repeatedly contemplates. So the 10th habit is simple. Feed the mind something higher than the feed. Read a passage from Marcus Aurelius, a page of Seneca, Epictetus, scripture, poetry, a paragraph from a serious book, anything that elevates the mind instead of shrinking it. This is not intellectual decoration. It is orientation. You are giving the mind a first principle before chaos begins making suggestions. And the effect compounds. One sentence can interrupt a destructive mood. One paragraph can restore proportion. One reminder can save a morning that noise was about to steal. That is why serious readers often carry a different kind of steadiness. They are not feeding exclusively on urgency. They are bathing the mind in perspective. If you want to become mentally unshakable, your first mental meal cannot be garbage. Feed the mind upward. Because what you repeatedly admire, you slowly become. Habit 11. Keep one and negotiable promise. This is where many people sabotage themselves. They create a morning routine so large, so idealized, so unrealistic, that it depends on perfect sleep, perfect energy, perfect weather, perfect mood, and a perfect life. And when that routine collapses, self-trust collapses with it. The Stoic way is simpler. Choose one non-negotiable act. One, something small enough to do on bad days and good days. Journal 1 page. Walk 10 minutes, make the bed, read 1 paragraph, sit in silence for 5 minutes. Drink water before coffee, do 20 push-ups. The point is not scale. The point is continuity. You need one act that says, every single morning, I still keep my word. That sentence matters more than people think, because self-respect is built less through ambition than through reliability to yourself. The person who cannot trust himself in small things eventually struggles to trust himself in large things too. So let the morning contain at least one promise kept, even if the day later gets messy, even if your mood drops, even if work becomes chaotic, even if life does not cooperate. You began with truth, and one clean act at dawn often prevents an entire day from collapsing into self-contempt. Habit 12. Leave with a mission, not a mood. This final habit gathers all the others into one direction. Do not leave your room asking, how do I feel? Ask, what is mine to do? That is the Stoic question, not what mood has arrived, not whether motivation is high, not whether your inner weather is perfect. What is mine to do? Be honest in this meeting. Be patient with this person. Finish this task. Carry yourself with dignity. Refuse unnecessary complaint. Do not abandon principle because emotion is loud. Do the next right thing. This is where the morning reset is headed, toward mission. Because moods shift, energy shifts, confidence shifts, but duty remains. And there is something profoundly stabilizing about that. When a person stops worshiping how they feel and starts honoring what is required, life becomes quieter. Not easier, quieter, less theatrical, less dependent on emotional weather, less chaotic, more exact. So leave with a mission, a real one, not a fantasy about changing your whole life by lunchtime, just the next honorable thing, then the next, then the next. That is how mentally unshakable people are made, not through intensity, through orderly return. So let us bring it together. What is a Stoic morning reset really? It is not perfection. It is not aesthetic discipline. It is not becoming a machine. It is not pretending you never wake up anxious, tired, discouraged, distracted, or unwilling. It is something much more mature than that. It is choosing not to hand your mind to randomness the moment you wake up. It is reclaiming the first hour from comfort, from noise, from old identity, from unconscious habit, from the crowd, from the algorithm, from the part of you that always wants the easier path. It is remembering that before the world asks anything of you, there is still a private realm under your command. Your attention, your posture, your first thought, your first refusal, your first act, your first truth. That realm is small, but it is enough to begin. And beginning well matters. Because the person who starts the day by telling the truth, by rising before excuses, by delaying the world's voice, by entering silence before noise, by creating order, by moving before mood, by rehearsing difficulty, by choosing character ahead of emotion, by feeding the mind something higher, by keeping one promise before breakfast, and by leaving the room with a mission instead of a mood, that person becomes difficult to shake. Not because life gets easier, because the center gets stronger. And once the center is stronger, everything changes. You stop needing perfect conditions to remain intact. You stop letting every inconvenience rewrite your state. You stop living as though the world has first rights over your mind. You stop acting surprised by difficulty. You stop asking mood to carry standards it was never built to carry. And little by little, morning by morning, a new self appears. Quieter, cleaner, more exact, less dramatic, less available to nonsense, more capable of meeting life without collapsing into it. That is the gift of the Stoic morning reset. Not a better morning, a stronger mind. So tomorrow, do not try to become legendary before sunrise. Just begin with one honest act, then another, then another. Let the morning belong to principle before it belongs to pressure. And if you do that long enough, one day you will notice something strange. The things that used to throw you off no longer own you. The mornings that used to bury you now build you. And the mind that once woke up fragile has become a place you can finally stand inside with respect. That is what we are after, not hype, not performance, not morning theater. Inner command. And if that is the kind of life you want, begin at dawn. Because the first battle of the day is rarely out there. It begins in the dark, in the quiet, with a single decision. Will I wake up as the old self, or will I reset?